But what happened? Because the United States had the foundations for this to be prevented. I understand in Latin America, we've never had that. Like our legislative system, as you explained here in Ocon, Yaron, comes from the continental viewpoint. It doesn't come from the Anglo-Saxon viewpoint of the importance of private property and individual rights. So wasn't Marx right? Maybe capitalism has the seed that self-destroys itself, that after some generations pass and they live rich and wealthy, they forget how hard it is to get there. So then you have new generations that say, wait a minute, why don't we just like redistribute wealth?
So the challenge with the United States is that it was founded with these fantastic political ideas on a foundation that is equivalent to quicksand. And this is why you can't just pick and choose what you like out of philosophy. Philosophy is a whole. And when you get the politics right, but you get everything else wrong, it's not going to last. And I don't blame the founding fathers for this, because they didn't have a complete philosophy, and there was no philosophers articulating a foundation for liberty. So to a large extent, the Enlightenment, that whole period, is building a beautiful city on quicksand. And that quicksand is the morality of altruism. It is the fact that they don't have a complete philosophical defense of reason. They don't understand the link between reason between reason and individual rights. And really, the only philosopher who's provided us with a system, an integrated system, from politics all the way down to metaphysics, that integrates it all and provides what I consider, a real, concrete and metal foundation for the ideas of capitalism is Ayn Rand. And since the founding fathers came before Ayn Rand, you can't blame them for what they did. They did the best that they could with the tools that they had. But it truly is a tragedy that we didn't have it.
Yeah, so I have like a few different things to say here. So first, going back to Marx himself, so maybe capitalism, it just spawns its own. We have, even in the U.S., we haven't had full, pure, respected capitalism. So, I mean, we had the platform set up for it, but we didn't quite do it. And once you start cheating on it, once you start in with the contradictions, the mixed premises, the mixed economy, it's just, the mix is going to grow. The poison is what spreads in the glass. You put a little drop of poison in here, it's going to pollute gradually, but eventually and steadily, because, well, if he's getting a special favor from the government, I want a special favor. I'm not stupid, right? So once you let in alien premises, that's how it grows and bleeds. But I just want to go back one more. Okay.
Before you go to another point, because this is very important, especially for people that are watching in Latin America, Brazil, Spain. Because there's two conceptions, right? The U.S. has always been capitalist.
I wish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's one.
Yeah.
And the other one of the people who, study a little bit more, they say, no, everything, there was capitalism until the Civil War and the creation of the Fed. Now you're saying there was never true capitalism.
Not fully, completely. And I'm not an economic historian, I'm a philosopher. But no, we always had a mix of some controls, of some government oversight in terms of the currency and so on.
Well, and if you think about before the Civil War, we had slavery. Right? That's not capitalist. That's anti-capitalist. The South was feudal, and then after the Civil War, it was a period, the freest we've been. But we had regulation of the railroads. We then had antitrust laws in the 1890s. Then we got a Federal Reserve in 1913. But even during that period, from the Civil War until World War I, or until the central bank, we had all kinds of regulations, all kinds of favors, all kinds of cronyism, all kinds of things. Now, it wasn't anywhere near as right. I wish we had what we had back then, right? It was as close as we've ever come to capitalism, and it's a million times better than what we have today. But we've never had it in pure form, and we've never had, since the founding, there's never been a defense of it. There's never been intellectuals who actually defended. The intellectuals in the 19th century, in a sense, hated the American system, attacked the American system, undermined the American system, certainly post-Civil War. So by the time you get to when you have a central bank and income tax, everybody's ready for it, because the intellectuals have been pounding away that this is evil, this is bad. The progressive, what they called themselves, the progressive movement at that time. But European influences, that little poison, although I think the poison was even there at the founding, slavery, for example. But European influences throughout the 19th century undercut American capitalism from the very beginning.
And going back to what Yaron was saying earlier, it's the altruism, he was saying
altruism,
the lack of the moral foundation. It's the altruism that undercut us throughout. I mean, earlier we were talking about individual rights, right? The idea of individual rights, among other things, it means your life is yours. Each man is an end in himself. That is incompatible with my thinking, I am my brother's keeper. I have to serve. Give and you shall receive from the Lord, right? If I really think that, that's exactly what's going to make me think, oh, well, he's needy. We have to give to him. So there's that fundamental contradiction between altruism and egoism, such that the defenders of capitalism, right? There are many so-called defenders of capitalism. They're apologists for capitalism, in the sense that they apologize for it. Yeah. It's like, oh, it's not so bad, or oh, look at GNP, or and they'll point out, but they're not getting at that core issue of egoism, altruism, whose life is it?
Yeah, and the essential of capitalism is not GDP. It's not wealth.
Right.
The essential of capitalism is freedom. It's the freedom of the individual to live his life in pursuit of his own happiness. And that contradiction is already in the founders. On the one hand, you've got in the Declaration of Independence, each individual has an inalienable right to pursue their own happiness.
Right.
On the other hand, you've got Thomas Jefferson and others articulating a morality, a Christian morality, a morality of sacrifice, a morality of what's good for the other is the standard of morality. And that undercuts immediately the idea of pursuit of happiness. Because is it the pursuit of happiness or is it the pursuit of other people's happiness? What should actually guide me? And that contradiction in morality then infects the politics.
So let's talk about that hypocrisy, that contradiction, because it has been called out by different people throughout history. For example, in France, Frédéric Bastiat, a lawmaker, mostly an on-lawmaker, because he wanted to take away all the laws that prevented true capitalism. A lawbreaker, yeah. And he has a very good short story about taxing the sun. The story of the candle makers, right? So he is mocking all these crazy subsidies, and he goes to the extreme of saying, well, why don't you candle makers go to parliament and ask for people to put wood in their windows and avoid the competition of the most cruel of all the competitors of all, that is the sun.
The sun, sure.
And with this, Bastiat mocks the fact that this is ridiculous. Also, you have, for example, Friedrich Hayek writing The Road to Serfdom, right? And warning about the dangers of having a totalitarian government that controls everything. Also, you have Ludwig von Mises, who talk about the anti-capitalist mentality or the evil within the socialism economic system. So what is so special about Ayn Rand? What is that she brings to the table that no one else has brought through history? And I just mentioned 3 examples, but there have been many other freedom fighters. Yeah. But what is it that she accomplishes that no one else had accomplished before?
I mean, it's basically that she presents a philosophy. If you think of Bastiat, he's fantastic. I mean, he's a genius. But he only deals with a certain layer. He only deals with that political layer. He deals with the law, and he does it beautifully and brilliantly, but he's not challenging, again, the fundamental premises that are in society. The altruism, the lack of understanding of what reason really is, and reason as being man's only, basic means of survival. Those ideas, he can defend. He's not a philosopher. He's a in a sense, a legal scholar. If you look at Hayek, I mean, it's interesting to look at Ayn Rand's marginalia comments when she read The Road to Serfdom. I mean, and you read it with that in mind. He compromises all the time. Okay. He is not a principled defender of true liberty. Oh, we need a little bit of welfare. We need a little bit of this. Or we need a central bank sometimes. Or we need this here, this there. Because he doesn't have the conception of an absolutist view of the role of government is to defend individual rights, period. No buts, ifs, nothing. Yeah. And he has this conception, which Rand rejects completely, of the common good, the public interest. Again, coming from altruism. We need to care about society, not about the individual in his own pursuit of happiness, but about what's good for them and the needy, and we need to take care. So, Road to Serfdom, he talks about the slippery slope. He's on the slippery slope. He puts us on the slippery slope.
Right, and even if you think back to somebody like John Stuart Mill, known as a great champion of liberty, sort of, kinda, and as long as it serves the public utilitarian, and I think so that's a form in which the conflict, the contradiction plays out in the U.S. and always has between the public good understood on these altruists, the good of all, and the individual has to be sacrificed for the greater utility and so on, that versus the individual. And Rand gives you the foundation for understanding. And I like that Yaron used the word absolute. You have absolute sovereignty over your own life. I mean, all that's got to be unpacked and understood in a certain way, right? But as long as you're not infringing on anybody else's rights,
right,
your life is yours. And that stands on the egoism, the morality of egoism. And that stands on, again, going back to philosophy more broadly, what she saw in the nature of reality and metaphysics and how we can know anything.
But isn't that the best for society? Isn't the
yes,
best for society that every individual has their rights respected?
Only if you understand what society means. Only if you understand that society is just a collection of individuals. It's not a unit in and of itself.
Right.
But the fact is that most of these thinkers, almost all of them, don't deal with society as a collection of individuals. They have a kind of metaphysical view that society is an entity, it's a thing. And it's okay to sacrifice the minority. If you viewed the individual's life as sacred, then you would never say I can sacrifice one individual for the sake of society. But they all, with the exception of Mises, I think Mises has a better conception here, and he's the best of the economists, and he's the most consistent of them. Yeah. I mean, he famously in a Montpellier meeting very early on stood up angrily and said, "You're all a bunch of socialists," including Hayek.
Yeah.
He called him a socialist and stormed out of the room because they were compromising. Yeah. And he would not compromise.
And he would call it for what it was.
And he also defended Rand,
Yes, he's the one who liked Rand, and there's a reason. They were both uncompromising absolutists. But let me say, and I think I've come to this more and more, one of the great tragedies of the 20th century, in my view, is that those great thinkers, Hayek, Mises, many of kind of the free market world that was out there, did not take Rand more seriously. If these giants had said, we're economists, and we get the economics, and we can explain the economics, and we can explain the economics of free markets and why it works. But you know what? We're not philosophers. We need a philosopher. And Ayn Rand here is presenting us with a philosophy that gives the foundation for what we believe in, you have to have that philosophical foundation. Yeah. The world we would be 50 years to 100 years further along in the fight for liberty.
Also, not just if they all automatically immediately bought Ayn Rand, but it's like, we ought to look into what she's saying more, and of course give it a full, thorough, critical, challenge it, etc. But take her seriously to begin with, and you'll see. Oh yeah,
I agree with that. In fact, I come from the libertarian background first. I studied Mises, Hayek, Bastiat, Hazlitt. It all makes sense. And then I read Rand way after that, reading Atlas Shrugged, like I went from zero to everything, And I was like, this is completely coherent. I don't see why this should be forced.
Completely coherent. I like both those words.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like both approaches nurture from each other. I mean, there could be things that, as you say, discussions and debates, but that's healthy because that makes a movement grow and have more influence and more impact. But I think it's because of what you said.
One of the problems is that economists don't recognize the importance of philosophy, and I think a lot of people out there in the free market movement, they get caught up in the economics, and the economics are beautiful and it's fun, and I love it, and so on. But unless they start understanding that it all rests on a foundation, and what undercuts freedom in the world today is that philosophical foundation, unless they start taking philosophy seriously and engage in objectivism, not just on the politics, but as a philosophy, and see its importance in that realm, they can't win. The freedom movement can't win. So. And I think they didn't do that with Rand when Rand was alive, which is a massive tragedy because she was the ultimate genius here. But that's the kind of engagement that has to happen unless the culture, and this is why it's so hard, unless the culture changes its fundamental philosophical approach, we're not going to get the politics right. Right? People have to become more egoistic. They have to at least have respect for egoism and respect for their own lives and want the freedom. Right? If people don't want to be free, they're not going to be free. But they should want to pursue their values, to achieve their happiness, and not have paternalistic government sitting on their shoulder like a mother telling you what you can and cannot do and what to eat and what you can't eat. But they have to have that self-esteem.
Right. No, the
that
nanny
self-confidence.
state that has been going on for so long, that term I think first came out of England maybe, but the nanny state, as it spread, people get used to being taken care of and they want to be taken care of. And I mean, we've all, in a sense, grow up. You know, part of what everybody needs to do, voters, it's like, grow the hell up and take responsibility for your own, you know, but we're in this self-reinforcing kind of cycle.
And the only way to change that self-reinforcing cycle is philosophy. It's a new set of values. It's a new way of thinking about the world.
I mean, let me talk about our libertarian friends for a minute, you know, and a lot of these economists that we were just talking about, they want limited government. Objectivists want limited government. Limited why? Limited how? Limited by the function of government, by its reason for being in the first place again. Whereas I think what you find with a lot of libertarians is they just want it. They don't really understand what liberty is fully. They don't understand what its foundations are, why you have a right to freedom, but they know that they want it. But they don't even want it because they don't really know what it is, but they know that they want something. They know that they want to feel a certain way. Hey, don't tread on me, right? Get out of my space. So, yeah, limit government because I have these feelings. So it's completely subjectivist. So that's another way in which I think a lot of the pro-liberty movements, you know, which on the surface look good, really are only superficial and are not getting at the kind of thing that Ayn Rand is talking about.
I mean, Hayek rejects the idea really of individual rights. I mean, he's not a defender of individual rights. He might be a defender of economic freedom, but not in the name of individual rights. So, he does it in the name of some kind of social utility. So, at the end of the day, he undercuts his own argument, and without that understanding of what liberty is and what is this fun, you know, we keep saying this, but it's so crucial. You won't ever achieve.
And while we're at it, let me say there are two excellent essays by Ayn Rand, which are available free at the Ayn Rand Institute website. One is simply called "The Nature of Government," and the other is called "Man's Rights." And if you wanted to start thinking more about these things and seeing the way in which she approached them, those two essays, Nature of Government, Man's Rights, available free on the web, just really a wonderful place to start in thinking more about this.
Right.
You demonstrate it in human terms in your novel Atlas Shrugged. And let me start by quoting from a review of this novel Atlas Shrugged that appeared in Newsweek. It said that you are out to destroy almost every edifice in the contemporary American way of life, our Judeo-Christian religion, our modified government-regulated capitalism, our rule by the majority will. Other reviews have said that you scorn churches and the concept of God. Are these accurate criticisms?
Yes, I agree with the facts, but not the estimate of this criticism. Namely, if I am challenging the base of all these institutions, I'm challenging the moral code of altruism, the precept that man's moral duty is to live for others, that man must sacrifice himself to others, which is the present-day morality.
What do you mean by sacrifice himself for others? Now we're getting to the point.
One moment. Since I'm challenging the base, I necessarily would challenge the institutions you named, which are a result of that morality.
All right.
And now what is self-sacrifice?
Yes, what is self-sacrifice? You say that you do not like the altruism by which we live. You like a certain kind of Ayn Randist selfishness.
I would say that I don't like is too weak a word. I consider it evil. And self-sacrifice is the precept that man needs to serve others in order to justify his existence, that his moral duty is to serve others. That is what most people believe today.
Well, yes, we're taught to feel concerned for our fellow man, to feel responsible for his welfare, to feel that we are, as religious people might put it, children under God and responsible one for the other. Now, why do you rebel? What's wrong with this philosophy?
But that is what, in fact, makes man a sacrificial animal. That man must work for others, concern himself with others, or be responsible for them. That is the role of a sacrificial object. I say that man is entitled to his own happiness and that he must achieve it himself, but that he cannot demand that others give up their lives to make him happy. And nor should he wish to sacrifice himself for the happiness of others. I hold that man should have self-esteem.
Using the super chat, and I noticed yesterday when I appealed for support for the show. Many of you stepped forward and actually supported the show for the first time. So I'll do it again. Maybe we'll get some more today. If you like what you're hearing, if you appreciate what I'm doing, then I appreciate your support. Those of you who don't yet support the show, please take this opportunity. Go to yaronbrookshow.com/support or go to subscribestar.com, Yaron Brook Show, and make a kind of a monthly contribution to keep this going. I'm not sure when the next